Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran Ayub, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Hey. How's it going, Eric?
Not too bad. I shipped a new version of the browser extension, which has been a couple of months in the making. A lot of bug fixes from community members. So the Excalibur debug extension has a whole bunch of new features now, including there was a bug where you weren't seeing the performance graph for individual systems in the engine. So now you can see that now. So you can see like, oh, is it collisions that are eating up my frame budget? Is it graphics? Is it off screen? Is it my custom thing? It'll tell you what's eating up your frame budget.
That's cool. Does it actually show you like a budget sort of stacked bar graph where it's like, here's what each of these subsystems is using?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So then you can see like, whoa, this part is real thick. It probably should not be that thick.
Yeah, exactly. And that can help you like steer towards, oh, I probably should think about this more, or I should approach this problem differently.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's been pretty useful. In fact, I don't know how I made games without the Excalibur debug extension before, because it is like 100% necessary for me now. Like I'm using it to look at like graphics bounds and geometry bounds and identifying click events and finding actors that are off screen or debugging actors that aren't where I think they should be. It's a huge deal. What's up with you? You had a hard weekend, I heard.
Well, I mean, before that, it was a pretty great weekend. We were in Tahoe, so I was doing my secret cult retreat. So that was a lot of fun. I've talked about this before, but it's the Slow-Fi retreat. It's put on by one of my coach who runs a program called Design a Life You Love. So it's a bunch of people who enjoy lifestyle design. And we talked about lots of different topics. A lot of people were, some people were unhappy with their current, jobs and wanted to figure out, like, could I take a mini retirement? What would that look like? Other people were happy in their jobs and were like, how can I just take some more time for myself? I talked to someone who is a geophysicist consultant.
What is that?
They work at a firm where basically they just answer the question, what is underneath the ground before we build, right?
Okay.
So some of the projects that they had worked on were like, company wants to build a data center. What is under the ground, right? Because that's going to dictate where we, place our footings and all that kind of stuff.
Lovecraftian horror.
So yes, exactly. So anyway, they were like here in Tahoe and they're like, I'm just looking at all the rocks because, that's what they got nerdy about. But that was a lot of fun. And then, so we made our way back home. And unfortunately, there was a bunch of spring storms between Reno, which is the airport that you have to take to get to Tahoe, and Denver, which was our first connection. And that flight got delayed like 5 hours. So we ended up missing the connection to Minneapolis. So we had to stay overnight in Denver. So it wasn't fun. I think we got 3 hours of sleep that night. And the kids were kind of miserable and we were kind of miserable. But we eventually made it back. So lesson learned, like, just try to do nonstop as much as you can, especially if you have a family. Now, in this case, I couldn't avoid it because this is the second time that we've been stuck in Denver. The first time we got flight credits because we just drove home because we could not get a flight for like 3 days. So we actually just used the flight credits from that trip to do this trip. And so that's why I went with United. But apparently Delta and Southwest both have nonstop flights to Reno. So that's what I would recommend if you're going to go to Tahoe.
I think this is still the case, but you can demand cash payment instead of flight credits.
Yeah, I tried to do that, but they make it almost impossibly hard to do that. So,
oh, bummer.
Yeah, I mean, I said, can I get this in cash? And they're like, no. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that you have to give that to me, but I'm not going to, this is like, too much stress. So yeah. But overall, it was a lot of fun, and I'm excited to go to the second retreat this year. So that'll be in New Hampshire.
I don't know where Breckenridge is. Is that where Breckenridge is? Or am I thinking of something else?
No, Breckenridge is in Colorado.
Oh, it's in Colorado.
Yeah, it's in the mountains.
Is that like a ski town?
Yes.
That's how much I know about this.
Yep. Yeah, we drove through Breckenridge last time we were in Colorado because we had to drive through the mountains to get to Mesa Verde National Park. So, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Is it weird if when you said Mesa Verde, I instantly had a Pavlovian response and started thinking of tacos?
Yes.
I'm just like, salsa verde? That sounds great to me.
Exactly. Yeah. Salsa verde. Cool. Well, should we get into the news for the week of May 11th?
Yeah. First up on the list is Deno 2.8 release is hot off the press on the blue skis. In 2.8, they have they're touting it's the biggest minor release ever, with their Node.js compatibility jumping from 42% to 75% and above. 500 plus Node Compat since 2.7. They also switched to TypeScript 6. They added import defer support, several new subcommands, catalog workspaces, CPU flame graphs, which is pretty dope if you want to be able to debug performance problems. Yeah. Their blog post is currently in draft, but you can see it ahead of that if you want. For the impatient, they have a link to their changelog. Any features that you want to call out here?
Well, one thing that drew my attention was some of the new commands in the Deno CLI. So one of them is Deno transpile, which is just a standalone TypeScript to JavaScript transpilation. So rather than doing Deno run and the transpilation happening behind the scenes, you can actually use the Deno CLI now to directly transpile a file, which is pretty cool. So you can get the output. And the other new command that they added was Deno Y, which is like the npm Y equivalent. So it explains why a dependency is in your graph. And now it works with JSR dependencies.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I feel like that is a thing I wish I had. And maybe that is a thing that already exists. I find myself looking at a package lock to find out why something is there. I'm like, what the heck? Why is this complaining? Or why am I getting a dependent bot for this?
You should be able to use the npm Y command. I've also used npm ls, and you give it the package, and it'll give you the dependency graph or the dependency tree, so that you can see, what is bringing in this dependency,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, today I learned. I'm probably going to be using that more often.
Yeah, it's useful, especially with the there's a vulnerability, and you're like, why do I have this package? Because then you can go and update the top level package if you want to try to get rid of some of those vulnerability alerts. All right, there's some little TypeScript news, TypeScript 7 news. VS Code, as of the last update, pretty much all of the core code now is type checked with TypeScript 7 native preview. So we're talking about the VS Code codebase itself is now being type checked by TypeScript 7, which is pretty cool. All right. And then next up, we had talked about the vibe port from Zig to Rust that Bun was going through. And initially when we reported, Jared seemed to be more like, hey, this is an experiment. Don't take it at face value. We're not going to be switching over to Rust. But it actually looks like that's basically what is happening now. So I think it is much more official. There's a blog post that's being written, and there are lots of open PRs in the repo that are now converting over to Rust. So that's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think this might be a mistake to jump so quickly and vibe port something that was, in theory, idiomatic in one language to non-idiomatic in another. I think this is a high-stakes PR event for Anthropic and Bun, because if this crashes and burns, it's not going to look good. Certainly, the optics will be bad.
Yeah.
So it struck me as really devil may care, and I don't know. Maybe I'm just like old man shakes fist at cloud, but I think I would have been a little more careful about it, considering the Rust is very much non-idiomatic Rust. It's very much transpiled Rust with lots of unsafe blocks.
So we already know that Bun rolls like this, but I think the thing that offends my sensibilities the most is that they're like, this is good enough to be a minor version release. Not just it should just be 2.0. Mm-hmm. You're rewriting the entire thing in a different language. There's going to be breaking changes. Mm-hmm. That's just going to come out as a minor release. So either, I don't know. I mean, they can do whatever they want, but I would have thought that they would, do like bun R, right? Like just release a separate like bun R preview and then, or bunner,
Bunner.
Yeah, and that'll be the Rust port, right? Just sort of like the TypeScript native preview. It's not like the TypeScript team was like, YOLO, we are just going to replace the entire TypeScript 6 engine with 7 in the next minor release.
I think another thing that makes me a little nervous is like from a security perspective, going to Rust like theoretically has security benefits from like a concurrency and memory corruption standpoint, but it doesn't really stop logic bugs, which have been, as far as I can tell, the majority of the CVEs lately. So I don't know if this is a good move necessarily for production software to do this so quickly. Certainly it's a good way to experiment, but I don't know. I tend to agree with Joel Draper on Blue Sky. This doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what they do. Like if it's sort of like a case study, like if it does work out, they're obviously going to be touting it like, oh my God, look at this, look what we were able to do. And then if it doesn't work out, they're either going to be silent about it and just silently go back to the Zig code base, or, I don't know. We'll see. I think what is interesting though is that it are probably going to see this more often, and even there was some rumblings that Node.js might take a look at doing a Rust rewrite. Now, I don't think they would approach it like this, but on the Node.land podcast, a few of the steering committee members were talking about maybe like now is a time where they could potentially do a Rust rewrite of Node.js. And that would be kind of interesting because that would mean that basically all the runtimes would be aligned on Rust, right? Because Deno is already on Rust. So then Bun would be on Rust, Deno would be on Rust, and potentially Node.js in the future would all be based on Rust. So then there's even less differentiation than now between all the core engines because all the runtimes are all going to be in Rust.
I think in particular, I think Rust is a good choice for like a server-side framework, especially like in the Deno or Node case, especially from Node, because Deno was kind of the pioneer here, and there's some hard work has already been done to wrap V8, which is a massive C++ code base in a Rust wrapper. Like certainly Node could springboard off of some of the work that Deno's done, which would be kind of fun, like trampoline off each other.
Didn't we talk about this? Maybe we only talked about it in our first half of the prediction episode that has not gone live yet. But one of my predictions was Deno and Node should just merge, right? And this would sort of portend that. Like it would be if I was looking in my crystal ball and Node.js technical steering committee decides, yeah, we should port to Rust. What are they going to use? They're probably going to use the Rusty V8 engine, right? And then suddenly, like Node and Deno are going to be very, very close, like one-on-one. And who's going to win that? I mean, I think we know the answer to that. So there's even less differentiation between all the engines once that happens. Obviously, Bun will be on JavaScript core, and then Node will be on V8, and Deno will be on V8. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, who knows what the future holds, but certainly I think we'll see with LLMs having an existing code base with existing tests, porting becomes more possible.
Cool. So let's move on to Rolldown 1.0 announcement by Void Zero. So this is pretty big news because it's been in RC for a long time. So basically, there are no planned breaking changes now to Rolldown's public API. There still is some output behavior that might change, like dead code elimination, chunking, and inlining. And option defaults might shift to deliver smaller and faster bundles, but this does not change the runtime behavior of the output. So this is pretty cool. This is pretty big news. So we can go through like what's sort of different since the RC. It looks like watch mode, which is experimental, was rebuilt on a new native file system watcher that's more reliable, allows for faster bundling, and includes WASM support. And then they've also added an experimental native magic string, which I'm not sure what that is. Oh, do you know what magic string is?
I have no idea what they mean by that.
So it says this replaces the JavaScript-based magic string implementation with a native Rust version. So Magic String is a JavaScript library developed by Rich Harris, the creator of Rollup and Svelte, that provides efficient string manipulation with automatic source map generation. It's commonly used by bundlers and build tools for code transformation and plugins, source map generation, precise line column tracking, and efficient string operations. So that's pretty cool.
Well, that's the thing. I think if I need to do some really fast string manipulation, I should probably look at that.
Yeah. Okay, so what's next after Rolldown 1.0? It says that they're already working on some exciting improvements, including Vite full bundle mode. When Vite was created, unbundled ESM was the right trade-off. No tool was both fast and had the HMR and plugin capabilities needed to bundle during dev. But as codebases grew, developers began to experience slow page loads due to the high number of unbundled network requests. Rolldown changes that by bundling the whole app for dev like production instead of serving per file ESM. Preliminary numbers are showing 3 times faster dev startup, 40% faster full reloads, and 10 times fewer network requests. So basically, rather than just getting all the ESM modules as separate network requests, it sounds like they'll offer a mode where you can just have it act like production, where it's just fully bundled in dev too. That's pretty neat. The other thing that they're working on is stabilizing lazy barrel optimization. It says here that traditional barrel modules forced bundlers to compile every module, even if only some are used. Needless to say, this was inefficient. It bloated both build times and output size. Rolldown released an experimental version of lazy barrel optimization that analyzes exports and only modules that are actually used. Very good. So this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, this is pretty slick. The thing that really caught my eye was they added one that Rolldown is now the default bundler for Vite. I don't know if that was abundantly clear now or not, but that is the case. And now you can use Rolldown options in your Vite config to pass Rolldown specific options. So if you want to do like your own chunking rules, they have an example here of chunking all of the things that come from node modules into a vendor folder, which feels good. Like being able to directly poke Rolldown seems real good.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been using Vite 8, you have been using Rolldown under the hood, but it was in release candidate, and so now it's stable. So now both Vite 8 and Rolldown 1 are stable.
All right. Next up, GitHub takes aim at Claude Code and Codex with its new Copilot app. It's built on the existing Copilot CLI, but you can bring your own model, which before I don't believe was the case.
Yeah, this is like you know how in Claude Desktop, I don't know if you use Claude Desktop, but they added like a code graphical interface, which basically uses Claude Code under the hood, but you can use it through the GUI, right, and manage the agent sessions and stuff using that. So this is basically the same thing, but for GitHub Copilot, because you could use the Copilot CLI just like you could with Claude Code CLI, but now they're going to introduce a desktop version of that. And it's currently in preview right now, so you'd have to request access if you want to try it out. But yeah, it seems like it could be pretty interesting because unlike Claude, GitHub Copilot is integrated with like your repos, your issues, your pull requests, probably like your projects and stuff like that, although that's not mentioned here. But I would assume that in the future, you'll get like your little Trello board and you'll be able to like assign an agent to, you know, the different tasks on there and stuff. That's my guess is what we might see in the future. But it's going to be a little bit more integrated than Claude Code. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what comes of that.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. We have a security corner now. I think we're formally introducing a security corner to the podcast because just each week it seems like we have a bunch of PSAs for people. So do you want to start it off?
Yeah. And if you aren't aware, Next.js has kind of been taking its lumps lately. This is your reminder that there have been like 12 CVEs in Next in the last week and a half. So update your Next.
And notably absent from their blog, unfortunately, because I would link to the blog post and I was looking for it and I did not see one.
Yeah, and they're also like not small CVEs. They're like middleware bypass, like cache poisoning, like middleware bypass means they're getting through your auth. Like it's not good.
Yeah, so definitely you want to update your Next.js versions.
Next, after the TanStack incident that forced us to go in during editing to add an additional note, They have a blog post about how they are hardening TanStack after the attack on their NPM.
Yeah, this was some good lessons learned. I think we're taking some of these lessons and might be implementing some changes to the workflow for Excalibur. One of the big ones that they noted was that if you use the OIDC trusted publishing workflow with GitHub Actions, you have to give it the permission to write tokens. So you give it like a ID token write permission. But the side effect of doing that means that if there is any code that gets executed as part of that workflow, it'll be able to mint new tokens and basically publish on your behalf as a trusted publisher, quote unquote. So one of the takeaways here is to separate your trusted publishing workflow file so that like someone who forks your code or makes a pull request or any other just random type of commit doesn't automatically just get that permission. So creating a separate like release workflow that is only just for trusted publishing and probably triggered by a tag versus just like a commit so that it's an intentional thing.
Another thing that I think everyone should look for is remove every use of the pull request target event in GitHub Actions because it's tricky to get right. And I don't think you actually need it very often. So I think you should just err on removing it. I think that's a good move. The other thing is pin your actions to a SHA, not a tag.
Yep. I have a tip for that. Some of the contributors over at quick.dev, the meta framework, they have a pull request where they actually wrote a PMPM lifecycle script that automatically pins all GitHub Actions in your workflow files to the latest SHA so that you don't have to go and remember to do it manually. So you might want to take a look at that because that's kind of a cool tip. So I will link to that pull request where you can copy some of that PMPM code so that you don't have to do it manually, which is kind of a hassle.
The other thing that they did as a part of the reaction is they disabled the PNPM cache as part of their release pipeline. And this is, I think, just part of the attack, I think, was they poisoned the PNPM cache to execute malicious code in throwaway fork. The attackers did. So this is just another thing that they're looking at as, well, okay, whether it can be safely reintroduced or if you really don't want anything cached when you're doing a release. If you want like a clean slate, like, built from nothing.
Sort of like a clean room release.
Clean room rebuild.
Yeah. That actually makes sense. It's hard because I think that you can modify the cache key so that this type of thing can be avoided, or maybe you can just disable caching on like fork builds or things like that. But it's probably just a good idea for release workflows to just have a clean slate build.
They are also working on adding a service called Zizmore, which is a static analysis tool for GitHub Actions. You can know if you're gonna blow your foot off.
Yeah.
Which I think is something that maybe we should look at as well. It's sponsored by Grafana Labs.
That's cool.
You know it's good.
Nice. Cool. There are a couple supply chain issues in the last week that we should probably talk about. One is a currently active supply chain attack, also called Mini Shai-Hulud, because the repositories that are affected have a description that is backwards, but it says Shai-Hulud strikes again. And this is in the AntV package scope, but it affects a whole bunch of packages, including some like Apache eCharts and a few other like packages you might not think about. So you should probably go take a look at this. Again, the payload is triggered by a pre-install script. So if you are ignoring scripts with your npm configuration, or you're using PNPM, or you're using like socket firewall, if those will block the lifecycle scripts by default, and you have to like manually run them. So you should be okay if you're doing that. But if this happens inside of like a GitHub action or something like that, yeah, it's pretty bad, and it affects at this point, I think there are over 800 or so packages that are affected.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 1,000 actually. Looking at the list now, it says 1,062 packages have been affected so far.
Yeah. And if you're like, oh, is this Groundhog's Day? You'd be right. This attack is a new wave of it starting in May 19th. So this is like incredibly fresh. So
yes. And it's interesting too because it actually spans not only NPM but PyPy and Composer as well. But the overwhelming majority is NPM. I think there are 6 PyPy entries across 3 packages and 1 Composer package version entry that have been affected. So Socket is doing some research and is investigating this. And so we'll link to the blog post where you can take a look at the affected packages. If you check your GitHub repositories, your public ones, I mean, as long as you don't have some of these weird repositories you don't remember creating, then your account is probably not affected, because what happens is that once the payload executes, it creates some public repositories in the account and then creates like GitHub Actions or whatever to do the malicious stuff that it needs to do. So if you don't have any of those, then your account is probably okay. But
yeah,
so this is pretty bad.
I'd say that it's just not a good idea to have scripts on.
No, not at this point. Not anymore.
Not in this day and age.
Not in this day and age. And the thing is, and Theo GG subtweeted the Socket blog post and is like, NPM, wake up. What are you doing about this? Because this is still, like, if you're using just vanilla NPM, you can still get got by these lifecycle scripts. They just have not addressed this as like a root cause. Like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, maybe there should be a prompt.
Yeah,
if anything, like let's make a breaking change because the harm is too great.
Yes.
And in case you weren't aware, that the whole goal of this malware is to spread and exfiltrate secrets. So it's a worm type malware, hence the name Shai-Hulud, which is the name the Fremen gave the giant sandworms. And this particular payload looks for a whole mess of different types of secrets. So
that is mini Shai-Hulud. There is another ongoing package supply chain issue with the popular Node-ipc NPM package. It was infected with a Credential Stealer. So this affected the 9.1.6, 9.2.3, and 12.0.1 versions. So if you had installed one of those versions, those were infected. So you should probably treat whatever machine that happened on as compromised. So the blog post does have a nice sort of like indicators of compromise. So one thing you can do is you can check or search for the Node-ipc versions, and you also want to check your NPM cache for those versions, because if your local NPM has that cached, it still might be on your machine. And so when you go to install Node-ipc, it's not going to fetch the new package, it's just going to install it from cache. So that's one thing always, is like whenever you're looking for these packages that have been compromised, don't just search your project package JSON files, but also the package lock files and the NPM cache. And you could also just clear your NPM cache as well. So
yeah. It's tough stuff out there. And I think Socket.dev, not sponsored, by the way, doing the Lord's work here of detecting these supply chain attacks really fast. I think this particular attack was detected by them, according to them, within 3 minutes of the publish. So they are, I think, one of the out front people protecting against this type of thing. And we pay for it. Like we're customers of our own volition. We pay for Socket.dev.
I was just telling Eric that I signed up for the team plan now because my Codebase has more than 1,000 dependencies. So you can use the Socket free plan with up to 1,000 dependencies. But because my project spans like NPM, NuGet, like I have 90 packages just for my .NET stuff, and then each of those has transitive dependencies. And then for my React front end, I have a whole bunch of dependencies there, and then they have transitive dependencies. So I easily ran up against the 1,000 dependency limit with the free plan. So I'm paying for the team plan now. But one nice thing about Socket is that it's scanning all my PRs. I also use the socket firewall locally so that I never use like npm install just by itself. I'm always using the socket firewall so that protects me at the network layer. If it tries to fetch something that's malicious, it'll stop it. It'll block it from doing that. And then you can also use the socket CLI to also do an npm install to do it safely too. So yeah, but just as a customer, I would highly recommend Socket. So yeah, they're definitely not sponsoring this episode, but I'm happy with them, so I'm happy to recommend them.
Yeah. I live in fear, so all of my local dev now is through the Socket CLI, and they have, it looks like you're doing npm, so it's like pretty transparent.
Yep. You can even set up an alias so that if you do run npm install accidentally, it'll still go through Socket.
And that's what I do because I just want to live my life.
Exactly. Yep. All right. Let's move on to some library watches. Speaking of security, Vitest 4.1.6 and the 5.0 beta 3 releases have security updates in them to address some CVEs. So be sure to update Vitest if you're on the 4x branch or the 5x beta branch.
Next up, a new library that I'm not sure we talked about before, new to me at least. StyleFrame now has a playground, and the whole thrust with StyleFrame is that you can write type-safe CSS in the browser, which is pretty slick. So you can try it now with play.styleframe.dev. And I think nowadays, my opinion, most frameworks need a playground. I think like table stakes, I think, for folks to evaluate them. But the API, pretty slick. It's kind of what you think it would be. It's like JSON styled and then types fall out, and it's nice.
Yeah. And on top of that, they also released 3.7.0 version. So StyleFrame has been out for a little while, and I don't think that we've talked about it, but their little tagline is the design systems engine for serious TypeScript applications. Enjoy type-checked design tokens, themes, utilities, recipes, and selectors. So that's pretty cool.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah,
Chef's kiss.
That's pretty nice. I might actually look at this for Keep Track My Games in the future because I think this would be pretty cool.
Another library that is new to me called mediabunny, version 1.45.0 is out. And according to them, now works basically everywhere. And with this, you get access to super fast hardware accelerated media decoding and encoding on the server. So you can inspect, process, transform media on the server without leaving TypeScript. So if you're doing any kind of media processing, this might be a thing to look at.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the name in like video decoding and video stuff on the server is usually FFmpeg, right? But you have to use that through like a process, like you have to create it as a child process, right? Because like a CLI.
Yeah,
usually.
there's also a library you can link.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
I could be wrong about that, but I think there is like a library you can link, so you don't have to shell out to it.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong about that.
Well, and so basically, mediabunny is like a wrapper around that, so you get full access to decoders, encoders, and video processing features. And it says that so you can use it in Node, Bun, or Deno, and the result is a server-side media processing API that integrates naturally with TypeScript, as opposed to the awkwardness and inefficiencies of calling out to the FFmpeg CLI. So this is one of those like libraries you can just pull in, and you don't have to link it or anything. It's just mediabunny just wraps FFmpeg with a nice TypeScript API. So this is pretty awesome. This is also something I might look at in the future because I do want to create some videos on the server.
Yeah.
So for some cool new features that I'm not going to talk about, but I was looking for a way to do this with like just a simpler API. So this is pretty cool. All right, should we go on to some community highlights?
Yes, we should. First up is LogRocket has a great blog post on how to migrate to TypeScript 6. It's got a whole step-by-step of things to look out for and things to do. And it's a great read. It's very short. So if you're like, oh man, I'm worried about this upgrade, don't worry. It's an extremely short and terse blog post, and you will be happy.
I think one nice thing about it is that it goes into each of the breaking changes. So if you get an error after you upgrade and you're like, what is this error about? The blog post will explain what the error is and how to fix it.
That's right. Next up, SpacetimeDB comes with a new blog post on May 14th talking about their prodigious and pretty amazing benchmarks of how fast their database is. And they're talking about their JavaScript database outperforming their Rust version of the database, which is wild.
Do you want to remind people what SpacetimeDB is?
Yeah, so the whole idea with SpacetimeDB is it was originally built as an engine for like an MMO. So, and they're like, why can't we make a game engine be a database? And so the idea is they kind of went at it from that angle and then realized that, oh, we might actually just have a really great database technology on our hands. So this is an extremely fast real-time database. And one of its claims to fame is that it can run any language in its backend as part of like column level or row level security as like WASM modules. So like if you have, you have Rust code, you have C# code, you have whatever, as long as you can build it into WASM, you can run it in their backend. So you can do business logic, for example, in the database. So you can think of them as like sprocs on steroids. But with their technology, some big claims, a big if true, extremely fast data replication between clients, which is pretty cool.
Yep. And if it gives you some idea, one of the investors is the founder of Roblox. So definitely sort of built for multiplayer games, but now just like an app development platform. In fact, it says here, SpacetimeDB is a general purpose relational database with ACID guarantees that takes stored procedures to the next level. You get to deploy your server logic directly into the database for 100 to 1,000 times better performance and a dead simple developer experience. So that's what Eric was just talking about. I mean, this is pretty cool if you think about if you want to build an app that you want it to like update in real time, like it automatically publish updates to the clients so that it's always in sync. So I think that's pretty cool. It's because it was designed for multiplayer games, but when you apply that to like an app, so you make a change anywhere inside the app and it's automatically pushed down to the client, which is pretty cool. Yeah. And like the transactions per second are pretty impressive, but like you said, it's based on their benchmarks. So, you'd have to try it with your own app and see how it goes. That's cool though.
And next up, Wasp, which is also new to me, which is an app development platform, spent 5 years and $5 million inventing a new programming language for web development. And they say it was a mistake. So they have a big blog post about how they went down this road of creating a new DSL to try and describe, common web app development patterns that would work with any stack. So like think like our super high level language for building web apps.
I think it's it was like a neat idea because they said in the blog post, think Terraform, but for your web app stack instead of cloud infrastructure. So like, I think in theory it sounded pretty interesting, but obviously in practice it sounds like it did not go as they hoped.
Yeah. And I think ambitious goal, and you know what? More power to them for trying it. And then they've decided to replace this Wasp DSL with TypeScript. So, and they're writing, it's only air quotes and interface change. Everything else stays the same. So
that's cool. Yeah.
And I think this is going to be generally good for anyone on this platform because then you don't have to learn a platform specific DSL.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe, but like I'm looking at some of the code for like their SDK, and I think it sounds like this is experimental, but you basically are like, if you want to create a page, you're like const login page equals app.page, and then you give it a name, and then you give it some metadata, and you're like, here's my component. You have to import it from, this source, and this is the default export name. And so like you're not actually importing it using ESM. You're like telling it where to import it, and it must do some like dynamic import on the back end when it actually builds the page. But you're like defining the route that it should go to. You can define like a query. And I would guess this is like not even just like a database query, but like almost like a TanStack query. Like it's just something that fetches something. And in this case, it's like get tasks. And then you can also define app.job, which is like a background job, like a cron job. So it is very much like I'm defining my app and like what it looks like through metadata, and I'm using their Wasp SDK, which is kind of interesting.
And it really does look like Terraform. So
yeah.
If you were like, is that hyperbole? No, that's like objectively it looks like Terraform.
Yep.
So And if you're like, maybe I wouldn't want to do that. If you're like me, if you do Terraform on the daily, you're like, but in any case, I think this is going to be a good move. And any of you out there that are tempted to make a DSL, my advice is it's almost always a mistake unless you can put a breakpoint in it. So take that for what it's worth.
Yep. Well, we can talk more about this later too, because it says in the next few weeks, we're going to be hosting launch week, during which we'll ship the TypeScript SDK as the primary way to use Wasp. So we'll probably have some more videos and ideas for like what this actually means and how it works at that time. Next up, you probably know of Express.js, and you probably have remembered like their website has not changed, I don't know, for a decade, probably. But that is no longer the case. So there's a new blog post on Express, a new look, and it says in 2024, the Express project went through a major reboot, new team, fresh vision for the framework, and a clear path forward. And so now in early 2025, they officially kicked off a redesign of the website and the documentation. So yeah, it looks pretty nice. They got a new logo and everything. The logo looks really cool, I have to say. It's pretty sweet looking. And then they have been working on the docs too, which looks pretty cool.
Next, I have a YouTube video with an interview with Anders. And in it, he talks about how AI is actually never going to replace software developers. And I think that is an uncontroversial take at this point, although I think certain business people want you to believe that.
Yeah.
But it's a great video about like where I think the line is. And Anders, I think, is right here. And I enjoy listening to him. And if you enjoy listening to him, I have another video with another interview about Anders' career and how he developed C#, Turbo, Pascal, and TypeScript. So definitely check those out.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Next on my list of YouTube videos, you can tell which kind of media I consume, is a great video from Jo at Deno called npm install and pray.
Exactly. This is what we're talking about.
Which is what we're talking about. And it is advertising a little bit of Deno, but it is talking about this exact same problem from a security perspective. So that we talked about.
Perfect.
Next, I have a video from Lucas, the next era of TypeScript, talking about Effect.js, which is this really opinionated, type-forward way of describing programs in TypeScript, how that works with AI. So they talk about how the LLM works with this in Effect with like TypeScript tooling, and why this works really well in Effect because you have a lot more guarantees from the type system in Effect than you would in like a traditional way of writing client or server-side software.
Yeah, this is related to a bleat that I saw from someone in the Blue Sky feed, saying that whenever they're using an LLM with a TypeScript codebase, they are reaching for Effect as the framework because it adds so many guardrails for the LLM to do a little bit of a better job on tasks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can be pretty reasonably sure that if it builds an Effect, it will run at runtime.
Next, there is a issue open in the Node.js repo. They want people to chime in if you use Alpine Linux in production for your Node.js hosting. Because did you know that the Alpine Docker build for Node.js is experimental? It's not actually stable. So it doesn't get the same updates that the other, like Ubuntu, does. So they have a issue promoting Alpine Linux out of experimental to be a tier 2 platform for Node.js so that it gets all the same updates and security updates that the other Docker builds do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is important because I was not aware that the Alpine build was not official.
Yeah, same. I'm pretty sure I've used the Alpine one in prod.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And so in the issue, even it's called out like it doesn't look any different than the other builds. So they're like, well, we're pretty sure that people know that it's experimental. And I'm sitting there going like, nope, did not know that. Didn't know.
Yep. Definitely have put that in prod. Oops.
So anyway, make sure you chime in on that issue to give your feedback.
Next up is dax.land, which is a really cool tool that does shell scripting that runs everywhere. And it's like a cross-platform TypeScript thing that runs in Deno and Node.js. It's inspired by like ZX. It has like a friendlier like dollar sign for spawning processes. It's got like a built-in shell, built-in commands and prompts. But if you needed to do like some shell work and you also like TypeScript, check out dax.land.
I could be speaking out of my butt here, but I think that Bun also has a native shell cross platform shell utility just like this. So you could use either one, I think. All right. You got a bleed of the week?
I have a bleed of the week. And this one comes from Paul Frazee. I am so sorry. I'm terrible with names. But they say by 2035, there will only be 2 programming languages. Obviously, TypeScript is one of them. And the other one is why there's a Go versus Rust hot war right now.
And Jake Bailey replies, how about a hot love triangle? Yeah, Paul is the CTO of Blue Sky. So he wins the bleed of the week, I guess.
Yeah, he sure does. He's got it down.
Love it. Cool. Have some cool links?
I do have some cool links. First up, I have another video about why HTML and Canvas is so cool and why everyone's excited.
What's in this one?
This actually goes through a whole bunch of examples of things that can be done.
Yeah.
Which I think if you were like looking for inspiration, looking for inspo, this is pretty slick.
Okay.
And also it kind of goes through how to think about it, like how to position the elements and like what like practical like development you have to do if this winds up being a thing.
That's sweet.
Also, in my quest to de-Googlify my life, there is a talk, a beginner's guide to image, which is a Google Photos clone, open source. So you can host your own images and not sacrifice the usability and the user friendliness that you and your family might rely on in Google Photos.
Yeah.
So Imich, IMICH, is open source software for doing Google Photos type stuff. So you can take back your life.
Sweet.
And then the last one is the math behind Yu-Gi-Oh! Exodia's draw in the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! From ADEF, who is awesome, is a fun YouTuber who does a lot of like Pokemon math content.
Uh-huh.
And if you are a random video game, board game, math nerd, you will enjoy their content as well.
That's neat. That sounds pretty funny. This one from Web Dev Simplified, you turned me on to actually, because I've been trying to figure out, like, some people have been asking, how do I get started with like local AI models? Because I'm sick of this frontier model stuff. I don't want to pay for tokens. I want to have less impact on the environment, that kind of thing. I just want to run it locally on my machine, my hardware. And it's not too hard if you use like LM Studio, but it is a bit of a barrier to like understand what models should you use, what do the model names mean, what does quantization mean, and things like that, and like which models will fit on your computer. And so Web Dev Simplified has a new video, the best local agentic coding workflow complete guide, and in it, spoiler, they're using LM Studio and I think Qwen 3.6, which is the one that I use.
Mm-hmm.
And also, fun fact, in VS Code Insiders, the new Insiders preview, they do have OpenAI compatible bring your own model endpoints. So you can then add your LM Studio endpoint, and so that you can use GitHub Copilot in VS Code with your local model. And we have someone on our Discord that has been using that for the past week, and they have really good things to say about it, and that they have not run into like any timeouts or errors. They had it build an entire website over the course of a weekend, 0 tokens consumed. It was all just from the local LLM. So very cool.
Yeah, the Qwen models with LM Studio are quite serviceable if you have like a medium good dev laptop.
Yep.
Like
I think
I have a 5-year-old nice dev laptop, and it's extremely serviceable.
I think we've been saying that basically if you have an M series MacBook, you're pretty good to go as long as you have like over 32 gigs of RAM, or even less than that. If you have a MacBook, if you have a PC or a Linux machine, you need a GPU with at least like 12 gigs of video RAM, which is pretty serviceable. Mine only has 6 gigs, so you would need a little bit better than what I have. But I don't use it on my PC. I use it on my MacBook, and the MacBook does a really great job with LM Studio. So pretty happy with that. The hardest part really is hooking it in to the tools that you use, because not every single one of them allows you to bring your own model. So really it's just kind of figuring out what tools work best for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you are like a Claude CLI like enjoyer, open code is very much
open code
in that style.
Yep. Yep. And maybe now even the GitHub Copilot CLI, depending on what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next up, my other cool link is just kind of interesting to know as a web developer, which is that the Chrome team is working on a standard with other browser vendors called declarative partial updates. And so here's the best way to describe this. Normally, when you send HTML to the browser renders it in order, right? Sequentially. And this is how the web has worked since day one. And basically what declarative partial updates does is say, hey, what if we didn't have to do that? What if you could ship parts of the page later on in the page lifecycle and the browser will just replace the content when it comes in? The way that they do it is it's still sequential. Like you're still delivering the HTML in order, but instead of putting the content and waiting for it, you actually put a marker. And this is using XML processing markers, processing instructions, which have also been there since day one, but they've just been ignored by browsers, by the browser engines. And so what this standard does is actually, instead of just ignoring them, it actually reads the markers. And then when you send the contents of that template later in the HTML response, the browser will then insert it into the document. And this has a lot of really cool implications. For example, you can do placeholders and async loading, right? So if you're loading the contents of your page because it's pretty heavy, you can just put a loading marker there and the browser will render your loading HTML. And then once the page is done and your database call or whatever finishes and you get the contents of the page, you can then return the template and it will insert it back into the document. So you've basically done an async lazy load entirely on the server. No JavaScript at all. I mean, that should like blow your mind right there.
That's pretty cool. I mean, this is
pretty
like
awesome.
I hope this is a thing. One, because I need more reasons to use the template element. And also something about the open angle bracket question mark just fills me with nostalgia.
This is like ASP. Classic ASP.
Yeah, classic ASP or PHP.
Yeah.
Like it fills me with some strong nostalgia.
But
this is kind of a well-established thing right now that's been really popular with islands and stuff. So this would be like a first party, like supported
native
by the platform way to do islands.
No framework, right?
No frameworks.
You would probably need a framework on the server to be able to like serve this in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
But you can play with it right now. It is available in Chrome 1.8, but it's under a flag. So you can read the blog post for how to enable it. But there are also polyfills, which will let you use the APIs right away. Obviously, it's not really going to really be out of order streaming. It's going to rely on JavaScript to like do the insertion for you. But in Chrome, it'll natively just work. So you could play with that. But there was a bunch of hubbub on this on Blue Sky because, like I said, this is like a foundational change to the way the web works. So this would be a really, really cool thing. They've been getting excellent feedback and a response from other browser vendors. So this, I think, will be something that we'll start to see on like the agenda for like interop, where all the browser vendors will probably align behind this. So this is pretty cool.
Super slick. Well, it's time for the Minnesota long goodbye.
The long goodbye. What's on your mind?
The security beatings will continue until morale improves.
You did say that. Yeah, I think you said that on the last episode, and it is holding true so far.
Yeah, it's definitely like a batten down the hatches, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, everyone just stop and go audit your stuff.
Yes.
And what you're doing. Like, I think right now it's important more than ever, maybe even to just start using dev containers, because we're running commands on the regular that are just doing full admin stuff to the environment.
Yes.
And that's just a huge blast radius now.
If I wasn't working on .NET framework stuff using Visual Studio, I would probably be using a dev container. I use a dev container when I work on Excalibur, for example. And if you are like an open source maintainer, you can create a dev container definition file like in your repo. And then when people clone your repo, at least in VS Code, it'll prompt them to be like, do you want to open this in a dev container? And so you can have all your dependencies set up. Like we needed Playwright installed, right, to run all the tests. So I was able to configure that with our dev container in Excalibur. So a first-time contributor can literally clone the repo, open in a dev container, which the only prerequisite is to have a Docker or a container runtime. So you could use Podman, or you could use Docker or Rancher or whatever. But then it just npm installs automatically, and it has the correct node versions and everything. So it's really nice. But you can do that locally with your own stuff too. Use a dev container.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people that I've been talking to that are using agents are kind of feeling the same. They're like, okay, well, this is like literally a chaos monkey that can run anything, and
Yes.
I'm running it in YOLO mode.
Yep.
Where I don't need to approve the things that it's doing. So a lot of folks I know are running things in VMs, like development VMs or development containers, because of, well, one, now I've got another side channel of attack where if someone knows that you're using an agent, they can prompt inject your agent to write malware for them.
Yes.
So they don't even have to distribute malware. They have to distribute a prompt that directs the agent to write malware, which I think is an incredibly likely attack vector that we'll start seeing.
Yeah.
If it's not already in the wild.
Yep. I'm sure people are trying to do that, or at least doing experiments with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is other than be careful, because I think developers are getting got, and like developers that are doing the right things are getting got.
Yeah.
So it really goes to show that defense is like all it takes is one slip, and attackers just have to find one hole.
Yeah.
So it's extremely asymmetric.
And that's exactly what I would say in a sales presentation if I was, Socket or some other company that's offering security analysis tools. Like, all it takes is for one of your developers in your entire enterprise to download a package that's malicious and then infects their machine and suddenly has access to your entire local network. And if that developer has admin access to a lot of stuff, well, that's a big compromise. So I think, like I said before previously, one of my predictions is that I think that the security and compliance, like that risk, is going to drive adoption of these like AI tools. Because I do actually have some firsthand experience now where I did have Copilot do a security review for a feature that I implemented, and it did find a few things. It found a few exploits, and it wrote some code to exploit them and to prove that it worked. And most of them were just DOS attacks, meaning that if someone crafted the right input, they could basically take down the website because it would cause so much CPU usage that it would just halt the system. So it patched those, and it wrote tests for them. So I have test coverage of each of those exploits. And I was pretty happy with what it did. I mean, that was only just for a single feature that I was working on. So now imagine that applied to your entire code base, right? I did get wind that GitHub is experimenting with something called code security, and it's basically a security agent that can like fix and scan for security vulnerabilities in your code base. And so I think that that's rolling out only to enterprises right now, but I would not be surprised to see that roll out to more GitHub users over the next year, because I think that that is going to be the place where LLMs are maybe going to win, just in that specific instance of like security analysis.
Static analysis, I think, is a huge use case here. And it doesn't need to be some frontier model either.
Right.
A lot of the local ones, or even like the cheap ones, do pretty good at finding stuff. I think it's important to be discerning about the tasks you delegate and the extremely suspicious of output, because as soon as you give it full trust, that's when it's going to like bite you.
Yes.
Certainly there's different classes of software where, you can YOLO it more than others. And, maybe your business can't survive a YOLO. Certainly ours can't. So, it does take some discipline to know like what is tedium and what is actual like thinking work. And I think it's important to be very like clear-eyed about that when you're like using tools like this. Me personally, for like learning, I treat it like Stack Overflow. Like I literally I don't use it in editor. So I use it like a chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
I treat it like Stack Overflow, where I ask it, like I'm like asking for like, okay, I'm trying to do this thing in this thing. and then it'll give me a response. And I treat it like I just read a Stack Overflow post, and then I synthesize and repeat for an implementation.
Yep.
That way I'm understanding what I'm doing and what's happening. And I can put my personal stamp on something because I had to do the synthesis still.
Yes.
For things that are like, I don't want to slap out the Angular boilerplate that is like 200 lines for this test. Let's use this to like wire up all my mocks because I've got like 5-10 things to mock, and that's just 0% thought. That's all text manipulation.
Yep. And I mean, sometimes like a good sort of devil's advocate response might be, but like, why do you have to do, like, you should be asking, why do I have to do all this boilerplate? Shouldn't I try to simplify it? But there's just some things that you just can't, like it's either how it's been, or that in order to not do that, it would be a Herculean effort, to migrate something off of it. And there's some tasks that you just have to do that are going to be tedious, and like those are kind of a nice fit to give to the robot to do. But for sure, like I've showed you my diagram before on a Wardley map where you have your left side of the map, which is like, this is where human learning needs to happen. And you have to be intentional about it. New features, even like bug fixes or refactors, things like that, where you as a human need to synthesize what's happening to figure it out. Like those are not things you want to delegate to the LLM. You want to do those yourself. You can use an LLM in a different way, which is like what you're doing, which is like coach is how I frame it sometimes in my courses, where I'm like, use the LLM as a coach or like a rubber duck, where you can like ask it questions, but don't expect it to create a solution for you. Like you still have to do that yourself. But I think that kind of thing takes a lot of practice to like do it, and you're going to mess up. Like sometimes you do something, you're like, oh, that was a waste of time. Should not have used the AI agent to do that. I could have done it myself faster. And then this stuff like you learn as you go through it. All right. I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, I think that'll be the long goodbye. Think about what you're doing. And maybe we can include that chart if you're feeling up to it. Otherwise, cut this part.
It's already on my Blue Sky. You can find it. You can find it on there. Yep.
Yeah, I have shared that with a lot of people in my company. And because I'll stand behind that. Like that I wholly agree with. So I think it's a good rubric at least to start the conversation and keep yourself grounded.
Yes, exactly. Okay, sounds good. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to TypeScript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at Kamronigus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.